The neighborhood parade had always been one of the few bright spots in a community otherwise plagued by endless HOA restrictions and rules, a day where families came together, kids painted their bikes in bright colors, neighbors lined the sidewalks with lawn chairs, and for once the whole subdivision felt alive instead of suffocated. My daughter, Emily, had been looking forward to it for weeks. At 12 years old, she lived her life in a wheelchair, but she never let that stop her from participating in everything she could. This year, she had carefully decorated her chair with her favorite ribbons, shiny streamers in blues, yellows, and purples, and even taped a small flag to the armrest. She wanted to feel like every other kid, to laugh and roll down the street while people clapped and cheered. For Emily, it was more than just a parade. It was a chance to shine in front of her neighbors and show she belonged. Unfortunately, belonging was not something Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, ever believed Emily deserved. Karen had a reputation that preceded her. She was notorious for sending violation notices over the smallest things, from lawn ornaments to the color of curtains visible through a window. She lived and breathed the HOA handbook, twisting its rules to suit her own obsessive sense of control. And for months she had made little digs at us, making remarks about Emily's wheelchair being unsightly or not in theme with the neighborhood aesthetic. We ignored her pettiness, thinking that was the best way to deal with people like her. But on the day of the parade, Karen's hostility escalated to a level none of us could have ever imagined. As Emily rolled proudly into the parade line, her ribbons fluttering in the morning breeze, I could see Karen watching from her porch with that familiar sour expression. Her arms were crossed, her lips pinched into a scowl, and her eyes tracked my daughter like she was some kind of offense against the neighborhood's image. I should have known trouble was brewing, but I never thought she would take things beyond her usual verbal attacks. Just as the first notes of a marching band filled the street, Karen stormed off her porch, her heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. She marched right into the middle of the parade, blocking Emily's path, and pointed at her wheelchair with a look of disgust. "That chair doesn't match HOA standards," she barked, her voice loud enough to silence the crowd. "Remove the decorations or leave the parade immediately." Gasps rippled through the spectators. Parents whispered in disbelief, pulling their children closer as if they were afraid of being caught in Karen's tirade. Emily froze, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair, her face caught between fear and confusion. I pushed through the crowd, ready to step between Karen and my daughter, but before I could, Karen's anger boiled over. Her face turned red. Her voice shook with rage as she screamed about community image and standards. Then, in one horrifying motion, she reached into her purse and pulled out a handgun. For a moment, the entire street froze in disbelief. It was as though the world stopped spinning, as though no one could comprehend what they were seeing. Karen, the same woman who sent people nasty letters about mailboxes being an inch too tall, was standing in the middle of a family parade with a firearm in her hand, waving it wildly at a child in a wheelchair. People screamed, children cried, parents grabbed their kids and scrambled for cover. Emily's eyes went wide with terror, and my heart nearly stopped. All the noise of the parade, the drums, the cheers, the laughter, was gone, replaced by a ringing silence broken only by Karen's voice as she shrieked, "Get that chair out of here! It doesn't belong in this neighborhood." My blood turned cold, and I knew in that instant we were no longer dealing with petty HOA harassment. We were staring down a nightmare none of us had seen coming. The sound of the gunshot ripped through the air with a violence that shattered the parade's joy, in an instant echoing down the street like thunder, freezing everyone in their tracks before the screaming began. I saw the flash, saw Karen's arm jolt from the recoil, and then I saw Emily slump forward in her chair, her small body trembling as the bullet tore across her shoulder, grazing terrifyingly close to her face. For a split second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world around me blurred into chaos, parents shrieking as they dragged their children away, the band dropping their instruments, the festive floats screeching to a halt in the middle of the road. My daughter's voice, soft and scared, snapped me back, "Dad, it hurts." I dropped to my knees beside her, pulling her into my arms, trying to steady my shaking hands as blood soaked into my shirt. "Stay with me. Baby, stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking, though I forced myself to stay calm for her. Neighbors rushed toward us, some calling 911, others screaming at Karen, who still stood in the street with the gun in her trembling hands, her face twisted in rage, but also shock, as if even she hadn't realized what she had done until the echo of her own bullet came back to haunt her. Several men tackled her before she could raise the weapon again, forcing it from her grip, pinning her to the pavement as she screamed incoherently about standards and rules. The sight of her thrashing while my daughter bled on the pavement seared into my memory as one of the most grotesque displays of misplaced power and hatred I'd ever seen. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, but every second felt like an eternity. I pressed my jacket against Emily's wound, trying to stop the bleeding, her tears streaking down her cheeks as she whispered, "Am I going to die?" And I shook my head fiercely, refusing to let her see the fear clawing at my own heart. The paramedics arrived in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices, prying her from my arms as they worked quickly, checking her vitals, wrapping her shoulder, and lifting her onto a stretcher while I stumbled after them, desperate not to let her out of my sight. The crowd surged around us, some people crying, others yelling at Karen as the police cuffed her and shoved her into the back of a cruiser, her protests about it was just an accident drowned out by the angry shouts of neighbors who had seen the whole thing. Parents clutched their children tighter, whispering that they were lucky it wasn't them, lucky the bullet hadn't struck a heart or a head. The parade was over, not with music or fireworks, but with a single act of senseless cruelty that turned our community upside down. In the ambulance, Emily squeezed my hand weakly, whispering, "I just wanted to be part of it, Dad." My throat closed, tears finally breaking free as I kissed her forehead and promised, "You are part of it, sweetheart. You're stronger than all of them." The flashing lights of the ambulance painted the windows red and blue as we raced to the hospital. And as I looked down at my daughter, my brave, beautiful girl who had done nothing more than decorate her chair in colors she loved, I swore then and there that Karen would never get away with this, not with excuses, not with lies, not with twisting the truth to protect her cruelty. She had taken a shot at my daughter in front of the whole town, and the town itself had become a witness to her crime. The days after the parade felt like living in a storm's aftermath, broken pieces of joy scattered everywhere, neighbors shaken, families whispering about what they had seen, and me sitting in a hospital room holding my daughter's hand as she recovered from a wound she never should have suffered. Emily survived, thank God, though the bullet left a scar across her shoulder and near her face that would never fully fade. But what stayed with me more than the scar was her resilience. Even as she lay in the hospital bed, bandaged and pale, she smiled when friends brought balloons and cards, whispering to them, "Don't worry, I'm okay." That strength from a 12-year-old girl humbled everyone who came to visit. Meanwhile, Karen sat in jail, her lawyer scrambling to spin her actions into some twisted tale of accident and misunderstanding, but the truth was undeniable. Hundreds of witnesses had seen her pull the trigger, dozens had filmed it, and the recordings captured not just the shot, but her hateful words about Emily's wheelchair not fitting the HOA colors. The courtroom was packed weeks later when the trial began, neighbors filling every seat, reporters buzzing, the community united not in fear, but in outrage at what had been allowed to fester under the name of rules. The prosecutor laid it out clearly. Karen's obsession with control had escalated into violence, and she had endangered not just my daughter, but the entire crowd at the parade. Her attorney's attempts to claim it was a slip or a misfire fell flat when video after video showed her aiming, screaming, pulling the trigger. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on multiple charges, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, and harassment. When the judge handed down her sentence, years in prison, the gasp of relief that swept through the courtroom wasn't just mine. It was the sound of an entire community realizing justice had been done. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in what came after. The HOA that had given Karen power crumbled under scrutiny, neighbors demanding its dissolution, realizing that the obsession with aesthetic had blinded them to the humanity of the very people living beside them. In the weeks that followed, houses that once looked uniform and sterile bloomed with color, porches painted bright, mailboxes decorated, kids drawing chalk art on the sidewalks without fear of violations. And at the center of it all was Emily. When she finally returned home, she insisted on decorating her wheelchair brighter than ever before, covering it in the same colors Karen had tried to shame her for, and when the next year's parade rolled around, she led it not in fear but in triumph. As she rolled down the street, the band playing behind her, the crowd erupted into cheers, louder than any celebration the town had ever seen. Neighbors waved flags painted in the same colors she loved, and parents lifted their children onto their shoulders to see her, to point and say, "That's the bravest girl in our town." My throat tightened as I walked behind her, overwhelmed with pride, realizing that Karen's hatred had backfired in the most powerful way possible. Instead of breaking my daughter, it had made her the symbol of hope, strength, and defiance against cruelty. And as Emily smiled, waving to the crowd, I knew that no scar, no memory of that dark day could ever overshadow the light she carried inside her. A light no HOA rule, no Karen, no bullet could ever extinguish.